So in this problem, we want to use our slope formula. The slope formula is one of the formulas that you guys need to know for our test. So on the test, I will give you guys points for knowing it. So you'll get a point for knowing this formula and writing it down the day of the test. If you don't know it, I can give it to you, but then I would take a point off because I'm going to give a point for knowing it. So just knowing that is hopefully something you guys can do. The slope formula we're talking about is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You also want to be careful as you guys do this. And again, this was, you don't have to put this on this, sorry, the orange sheet or whatever. This is salmon colored sheet. This is just what we did as our homework quiz. So going through this, remember x and y go together. So I'm subtracting my y's. So 7 minus a negative 3 over 5 minus 5. When I go to do that, 7 minus a negative 3 is going to be 7 plus 3. So that's actually going to be 10. What's 5 minus 5 going to be? It's going to be 0. Now, what happens when we divide by 0?
Undefined.
You get an undefined answer. You cannot divide by 0. If you put 10 divided by 0 in your calculator will give you an error message or say can't divide by 0. This is that swear word in math. So we would call this undefined. So this is slope dude falling off a cliff. So he's, again, so it's not able to explain it. So remember that when it is 0 in the denominator, we want to write that it's undefined. So just a reminder, that's one of our 2 formulas that we need to know for this test. And hopefully that will go and you know how to use them then. So we're going to talk about the different types of graphing. So we learned 4 different types of graphing from what I recall. I'm trying to make sure I have 4, and now I'm only thinking of 3. But maybe we'll make sense of it here. So our different types of graphing, maybe I want one where it's not in slope-intercept. All right, so our different types of graphing, we'll go sequentially the way we did in the lessons. You have to know how to graph them all the different ways. So our different types of graphing, our first one we learned we could graph by a table of values. So if we have no idea how to graph, so the type is going to be a table of values. So if you guys could put this on your salmon sheet. So on the review that we're doing tonight for our homework, this is going to be questions. You're going to graph by a table of values for questions 8 through 10. So for your homework tonight, just to remind you so you know what they look like or what method we're using. But on the test, I'm not going to necessarily maybe I guess I'll give you guys a table and show you guys that. But the biggest thing is that you should know how to graph it regardless of the type. So our steps for a table of values is being able to basically make a table that goes with that equation. Shh, guys, I need you to stop. So my equation is 4 minus 2x, and we're going to graph this using a table of values. So in order to graph using a table of values, basically what we want to do is we want to get pick whatever x values we want. Now, on the test, I believe I picked the x values for you. So I'll pick some, so that way it makes it easier for me to grade than if you're all picking your own. So we're going to pick the x values for our table, and then we have to find y. So I'm going to pick these 4 for right now. So we pick those x values, and if we're graphing by a table, all I have to do is take those and substitute them in to find my y. our y values. So what I'm doing here is, notice in your equation, it's 4 minus 2 times x. They don't write the times, they assume you know it's there. So again, if you're putting that in your calculator, you have to know that. And we're going to substitute that in for each of these. So I multiply before I add or subtract. So I'm doing negative 2 times 1 is positive 2, plus 4 is 6. But again, you guys have to know how to get that number. I can't just show you how to do that. Obviously, that's what you're being tested on. So making sure you guys are practicing and putting that in. So checking that in your calculator now is better than waiting till the test day. So if anyone has questions on that, please let me know. So negative 1, 6 is my first point. So I'm going to plot the point then. We're going to do the same thing for our other points there. So we're going to put 0 in. I always think 0 is an easy one to put in, but sometimes easy gets more confusing. That part just cancels out, so that's just 4. And again, if we're doing this correctly, this should form a straight line. If it's not forming a straight line, something's going wrong. I kind of want to readdress or figure out what's happening that's wrong about it. Oops. Our next one, 4 minus 2 times 1. So 4 minus 2. And then 4 minus 2 times 2. So we get our straight line here. Now I know you guys can graph other ways. Like there's other ways we know how to graph, but if I'm asking you guys to graph by a table, I expect you guys to make a table. Any questions there with that? The next type of graphing we learned was graphing by intercepts. So being able to graph our intercepts. And that's where we only find the 2 points and then draw a line.
Yeah.
Guys, you don't need to say that. It's not helpful. So our next one here is graph by intercepts. And again, for our review that we're going to do, we're going to do a few questions with graphing by intercepts. And I think that one is 11 through 14. We're going to graph by intercepts. And this is where we again find those 2 points on how to graph them, or we find each of those points and then we get those drawn on our graph and are able to draw the line. So you only have to find 2 points rather than finding a whole table of points. So this is where we talked about the x-intercept is where y is always 0. So in that case, that means I have a coordinate point that's something comma 0. And then there's also a y-intercept where x is always 0. Oops, that's not right. And so this one would be 0 comma something. And we have to figure out what the something is by substituting the 0 in, taking turns, making each of the values be 0. And all of this we've done before. This is nothing new to you guys. It's just whether or not you can remember how to do it when it comes to the test. And I just thought this was a different organizer to kind of think about those different types. And each of these, there's probably only going to be one question of each. So it's not like there's like 15 of the same question. But at the same time, I don't want you to get it wrong just because you forgot like that method when they're not really that difficult, hopefully. So if I have 2x minus 3y equals 12 is my equation. We're going to find our x and y intercepts there. So again, for my x-intercept, I'm going to put y in as 0. So the y is 0. So I'm making that second half be 0 there. So this cancels. And then we're going to divide. And so we find out x is 6. So that's our first point. 6, 0. So we can then put that on the x-axis at 6, 0. So we're halfway done. Hopefully the algebra part of it's not too tough. I mean, it's the same kind of steps each time. And the other one, now I take turns giving the other one 0. So now I'm taking that same equation, but I'm putting a 0 in for x. But careful, that 3 is a negative 3y. So that's a spot you can miss that negative. Be careful there with that. So negative 3y equals 12. So we're going to divide by negative 3. So we end up with y is negative 4. So that's our other point. Now careful not to combine these. Every once in a while, I have a student combine them to make a single dot. We don't want to do that. The 2 dots are what we want to draw our line. So knowing how to graph each of these types on our test is obviously, I'm telling you it's going to be on there. There won't be any surprises with that. That definitely will be there for you guys. Okay. All right, so when we're ready, we're going to flip to the other side. So our next type of graphing is graphing using slope-intercept form. And this is the one that we'll test on a little bit more. So there'll be more questions on slope-intercept form because this is the one that gets used a lot more. Is more, it's quicker, it's just the easier way to do things. But knowing how to do these problems all these different ways is fine. So slope-intercept form. Now I'm going to give us a little bit tougher slope-intercept equation to work with on this one because I don't want you always just remembering that the easiest way to do this. So we're going to end up having to do a little work to make it look that way first. So it must be in the form y equals mx plus b. If it's not in that form, we have to get it into that form. Can you stop, please? Daniel, stop. And then remember that the b is where we begin on the y-axis. I may ask you guys what the y-intercept is. That's the b. That gets used a ton. and throughout all that we do with this. And then the slope is move using rise over run. If you notice, I still had that up over here, so we've been using it so much. And remember, the slope is the m. And so we'll do a problem that we have to do a little bit of work for first here. So we have 3y equals x minus 12. We're going to graph this. So 3y equals x minus 12. So I have to first get it as y equals mx plus b. So what are we going to do that first? What do we have to do? What's happening to y? Y isn't all alone right now. Math's being done to y. Yep. Yeah, so it's being multiplied, so instead we have to divide by 3. Now if I do that to one part, I have to do to all the parts here. So divide by 3, divide by 3. Okay. So I have y equals, so in front of this x, remember there's like a 1 there. So it's like 1/3 x. And then negative 12 over 3 is a negative 4. Is everyone okay with it? I got the 1/3 from. Is that all right? We're going to take a break after this. So stick with me here. Let's finish this problem. I think we could do a walk, don't you think? It's nice enough. I think it might be one of our nice one of the last nice days.
It's 60.
Oh my goodness. I keep meaning to bring like a little Matrox car to see if I can get him to like drive on it. Like if you put under his belly, if he can move faster. I've seen that on like Instagram. Okay, so guys, our b is negative 4. So that's where we're going to begin on our y-axis. And then we're going to do our slope of 1/3. So we're going to go up 1 over 3. Up 1 over 3 from that spot. But then I can also reverse it and go down 1, back 3. And this is the type of graphing we're going to do more often. Like this would be my go-to way of graphing just because it's so fast to get so many points in comparison to some of the other ones. Okay?